right now, God willing. Boom. Done.
Yeah.
Okay. So Salãmun Alaykum. So here we go. Okay. Welcome to the Quran study for May 19th. I hope everyone's having a good Ramadan. Okay, Masha Allah. We're going to start from 130 and we'll go for a while, probably go past 150. See how this goes. Masha Allah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. 130. O you jinns and humans, did you not receive messengers from among you who narrated to you my revelations and warned you about the meeting of this day? They will say, we bear witness against ourselves. They were totally preoccupied with the worldly life, and they will bear witness against themselves that they were disbelievers. 131. This is to show that your Lord never annihilates any community unjustly, while its people are unaware. 132. Everyone will attain a rank commensurate with their deeds. Your Lord is never unaware of anything they do. 133. Your Lord is the rich one, possessor of all mercy. If he wills, he can remove you and substitute whomever he wills in your place, just as he produced you from progeny of other people. 134. What is promised to you will come to pass, and you can never evade it. Say, 135. Say, O my people, do your best, and so will I. You will surely find out who the ultimate victors are. Certainly, the wicked will never succeed. Let me review those. So in 130, God is saying that the jinns and humans had messengers who were among us, and they narrated to us God's revelations and warned us. But most people are totally preoccupied with this worldly life. As we know, we witnessed it. We see how we're trying to undo the preoccupation that we created in our own lives. We become totally invested in what we perceive as the joys and the valuable things in this life, and part of this is disassembling what we had learned, what we had concluded was valuable to spend your time on. Fact is we need to reset our priorities. It's a continual process of getting your priorities to understand that it's all about worshiping God alone and growing your soul with mentioning God, having God be throughout your day in your life. Now, in 133, he reminds us that he can remove us and substitute us with other people. And in 134, he said, this, what is promised to you, it will come to pass. And 135, he's saying the ultimate victors are the believers. And so the messenger comes, warns, he warns, and God's saying, hey, I can replace you. And it's going to happen this morning. And with the messenger of the covenant in Muslim perspective or submitter perspective, yeah, it's a Muslim perspective. He said, he shared what he sent to all the presidents and kings in the Muslim world. He said, I'm enclosing enough physical, it says, message sent to presidents and kings in the Muslim world. Great news and an urgent alert for the Muslims. I am enclosing enough physical, irrefutable evidence to prove that God has sent a messenger to save all the Muslims or submitters, remove all innovations, traditions, and superstitions, and restore Islam to its original pristine purity. God wishes to save the Muslim Ummah from humiliation and defeat, and to provide the true Muslims with great dignity and prosperity and prominence among the nations of the world. Please review the enclosed summary of the evidence, then contact me. This is from one of the Muslims' perspectives, shows you what he did to warn the world. And the warning's been out there. I wonder if any of these presidents actually got in front of them the message seen in their eyes, but they've been told quite an effort to share the warning. And as God says in 6:135, you will surely find out who the ultimate victors are. Of course, that's the believers. And let's see, 37, 171 through 173. Our decision is already decreed for our servants, the messengers. They are surely the victors. Our soldiers are the winners. So the messengers will win. They're the victors. They get the message out, the complete message. He won. That's a good way to show that the messenger's job was complete too, this verse, because he's the victor. So how could you have a messenger whose his job was interrupted and he'd be the victor? He's the victor. He won, completed his job, and he's in a great place. And our soldiers are the winners. God willing, we can be among the soldiers, the people who work for God, that fight for God. Now, speaking of the warning, he's saying, I'll substitute the other people. He says that he'll never annihilate a community until it's warned. And this is a Muslim perspective in August 88. I'll read from this. Retribution imminent for disbelievers. So we had a messenger in the 80s. He came and gave a warning, and this is what he's writing. Retribution imminent for disbelievers. The Quran alerts us that God sends his messengers just ahead of a retribution for the disbelievers. So you got a couple verses here that reinforce this notion. So let me read. This is 34:46. This is Dr. Khalifa. This is referring to him, to the messengers of the covenant. Say, I ask you to do one thing: devote yourselves to God in pairs or as individuals. Then reflect. Your friend Rashad is not crazy. He is a manifest warner to you just before the advent of a terrible retribution. Now, 17:15 says, whoever is guided for his own good, and whoever goes astray does so to his own detriment. No sinner will bear the sins of anyone else. We never punish without first sending a messenger. So the key point I'm focusing on there is the warning that there has been a messenger sent. There's a warning. So what happens after the warning? It's a fact. And that's one of the things that it's a fact that God sends a retribution after the warner. It's a fact. We have Surah 7 where God goes through a litany of different messengers who did their warning. And let's see, Noah in Surah 7, verse 72. Subsequently, we saved him and his followers with our mercy, and we wiped out those who rejected our revelations and refused to believe. That was about Noah. Now you go to Salih in the same surah, verse 78 and 79. The quake then destroyed them, leaving them dead in their homes. As he left them, he said, O my people, I have delivered my messages to you and advised you, but you dislike anyone who advises you. So that was Salih. The quake destroyed them. Then you have Lot. We know that one. Verse 84, we showered them with a miserable shower. Note the consequences for the guilty. And Shuaib, Surah 7, 91 through 93. Consequently, the quake destroyed them, leaving them dead in their homes. It was as those who disbelieved Shuaib never existed. Those who disbelieved Shuaib were the losers. As he moved away from them, he said, "O my people, I have delivered the messages of my Lord and advised you. How could I grieve over disbelieving people?" So that's an illustration of the messenger comes, warns, people ignore the warning. Why? Because they are preoccupied with this worldly life, as we find in 6:130. And then a retribution comes, and so that's part of the warning, you know. Okay, let's move on to 6:136. Abusing God's provisions is the subtitle. They even set aside a share of God's provisions of crops and livestock, saying, "This share belongs to God," according to their claims, "and this share belongs to our idols." However, what was set aside for their idols never reached God, while the share they set aside for God inevitably went to their idols. Miserable indeed is their judgment. 6:137. Thus were the idol worshippers duped by their idols to the extent of killing their own children. In fact, their idols inflict great pain upon them and confuse their religion for them. Had God willed, they would not have done it. You shall disregard them and their fabrications. So here we got people setting aside shares of crops and livestock. I think of the like how there used to be stores of grain for the gods, and I think of also like the collections in these new age churches like that are creating these mega churches like Joel Osteen. So here's what it says. God says, whatever was let's see. However, what was set aside for their idols never reached God, while the share they set aside for God inevitably went to their idols. So that's here you got these people going to church. They're giving money for God, the cause of God. Well, where does it go? Well, let me just tell you some of that. Let's see. Joel Osteen, he's a very popular one. He's in Texas, Houston area. $40 million is his net worth, reportedly. Benny Hinn, he's this guy who does all these healings live on TV. He always puts his hand out on their forehead and they fall backwards and I'm healed. And he's reportedly worth 60 million. And Pat Robertson, which is a very famous one, he's reportedly worth 100 million. Why am I talking about this? Because we're talking about while the share they set aside for God inevitably went to their idols. So here these preachers have become their idols. And then here's this one. This one just blows them all out. This was Kenneth Copeland. They're not sure, but they're thinking it's between 400 and 700 million that he's worth. So that's definitely how come that's so gross. It's terrible. So then in the 6:137, when I was talking about how the idol worshippers are duped by their idols, they're duped by these preachers that were deep. We got, not just in Christianity, of course, all of these scholars of Islam and people who've written all this extra Sharia law, and they confuse all of the hadith, have confused the religion to such a great extent. And what is mentioned here is to the extent of killing your own children. Well, the footnote here, I'll read that. It says 6:137, a perfect example is the internationally infamous incident of the execution of a Saudi Arabian princess in 1978 for alleged adultery. God's law institutes whipping, not execution, as punishment for adultery, while the idolatrous laws stipulate execution. So the hadith have abrogated the Quran in this instance, and so they murder the people who are guilty of adultery. Now, this became a real big deal, actually, this instance. And I'm going to talk about it for a second because it's one of those instances where the messenger had all of these events God aligned up to happen to illustrate the message for him. For example, there was the Jarvik Heart instance, where we had an instance where the guy had a stroke and he was dead before, I think even for 19 days before he died. And that was provide a great illustration for how Jesus was dead. He was gone, but his body was alive, and that was a good example. Well, another really good example is that in 1980 there's this huge documentary that made a big deal in Britain and in the United States on this murder in Saudi Arabia. So it was current events to help illustrate this point. So he's using things that were really front and center in the media. And so let me read a little bit about this. You got it was Princess Masha bint Fahd of Saudi Arabia. And it was a guy his name is Muhammad bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. I'm sorry. She was a daughter of Muhammad bin Abdulaziz. So she was a Saudi princess. And she went to Lebanon to attend school. And she fell in love with this nephew of a Saudi ambassador in Lebanon. And they began an affair. And when they returned, it emerged that they had conspired to meet alone on a couple occasions, and a charge of adultery was put against them. And she tried to escape. She tried to fake her own drowning and then tried to get out of the airport. But a passport examiner found her, and she was returned to her family. And of course, what they did is they applied Wahhabi Sharia law, and in there has to be a testimony of, and as we know from the Quran, you're supposed to have four witnesses of the act of sexual penetration. Well, or by their admission of guilt, stating 3 times in court, I have committed adultery. That's what it says here, that they had to go and admit 3 times in court that they committed adultery. So either there's 4 people who witnessed, or they admit another 3 times that they had committed adultery. And her family urged her not to confess, but instead to merely promise never to see the lover again. But on her return to the courtroom, she said she decided to confess. She says, I have committed adultery 3 times. And so they executed them. It was happened on the 15th of July of 1977. And they shot her. And it wasn't done where they usually do the executions in Dira Square. They did it, I think, in a private setting, or I can't remember where, near the palace. Executions were conducted near the palace in Jeddah, and then they made the guy watch her get shot. The lover he watched the girl get shot, and then they used a sword to. And they didn't do a very good job. It took them a bunch of times to get it done. And so it was just a gruesome event. And so independent film producers came to Saudi Arabia and started getting into this story, reviewing the whole thing. And this was on ITV in British, for a British documentary. And then it became, then they were going to show it in the United States in 1980. And that's where it became a big deal. And supposedly, at that time, the United States was trying to nurture its relationship with Saudi Arabia, and so this is an international incident. No, we don't want to defame Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia offered reportedly $11 million for the network to suppress the film, but they eventually showed it. And anyway, the interesting thing about it is she was 19 when she was killed. So all of this stuff happened 3 years earlier. So she would have been 16, 17 when this happened, and then killed when she was 19. So that's how gross of an example of killing, of having your religion confused for you is. That's what they bet the results was that. I thought that was interesting to share that. So let's go back to Quran at 6:138. Subtitle: Religious Innovations Condemned. They said, "These are livestock and crops that are prohibited. No one shall eat them except whomever we permit." So they claimed. They also prohibited the riding of certain livestock. Even the livestock they ate, they never pronounced God's name as they sacrificed them. Such are the innovations attributed to him. He will surely requite them for their innovations. So, it's these innovations of prohibitions of food. We're seeing a lot of that right now. We're seeing the veganism and vegetarianism, which I live in Boulder, Colorado. There's a lot of influence from India here of religions. It's because in the 70s, 80s, 70s and 80s, perhaps even starting in the 60s, there's an infatuation with spiritual movements and exotic. It was exotic for us Americans to have some type of it, to be educated in like the Far East and India, the Buddhists and Hindus, and this idea of spiritual awareness and self-actualization. And so it was, in a sense, it's the ego wanting to acquire spirituality. It's a possession. And so we became obsessed with that. And so it exists to today. And there's foundations here in where I live for Buddhism, Hinduism, and that's influenced this movement of vegetarianism, veganism to a large extent, and it's centered upon this notion that that life is sacred and you must preserve life. Well, of course, life is sacred, but God has told us that the animals subdue themselves for us, and part of it is food, and that's God. But these people are being more godly than God, according to, for example, Hinduism. There's people who do eat in Hinduism who eat cows. But as we know, the cow has been venerated among them, and the Krishna condemns all killing of men, cattle, and horses, and prays to some god Agni to punish those who kill. So they don't want you to kill a cow. And Jainism is against violence to all living beings, including cattle. According to Jain sutras, human must avoid all killing and slaughter because all living things are fond of life. They suffer and they feel pain. They like to live and long to live. So this is Jainism. That it's, I guess, it's people's good intentions gone awry. Under not seeing that God created provisions for us. These things are for us, but of course they want to be more godly than God. In Buddhism, the text of Buddhism state ahimsa. That's ahimsa is a concept that they have of preserving life. So ahimsa to be one of the 5 ethical precepts, which requires a practicing Buddhist to refrain from killing living beings. So I don't know how you live on this planet without killing living beings. I mean, you walk across the grass, you're probably going to kill something. Plants are living beings. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. There's at some point you are, God knows that. See, that's the thing, is they don't have the understanding of God being in control, creating things for you. And Sikhs, they also, the Sikhism, the cow, the buffalo, the ox are part of the rural life for the Sikhs, and these are never slaughtered for the consumption by any method, and they're supposed to be treated with respect, and beef is strictly avoided. So the Sikhs do it that as well. Now, I found online this somebody wrote, there's a cow protection bill that was written in 2017, and so in India somebody's pushing, and I'll read it. A Cow Protection Bill 2017, a bill to create an authority to ensure stabilization of population of cows, and to suggest such measures to comply with Articles 37 and 40 of the Constitution, to ban the slaughter of cows and to provide for deterrent punishment, including death penalty for slaughter of cow and for matters connected therewith or incidents thereto. That's what they wanted to do. So death penalty for killing a cow is proposed. But, it's interesting. Apparently pigs are a popular food in India, by the way. So they got that upside down. 6139. Let's get back to the Quran. They also said, what is in the bellies of these livestock is reserved exclusively for the males among us, and prohibited for the wives. But if it was stillborn, they permitted their wives to share therein. He will certainly requite them for their innovations. He is most wise, omniscient. That one, it's not only is it a prohibition, but it's also exposing this second-class citizen that the wives are, that they put their wives in this position. 6140. Losers indeed are those who killed their children foolishly due to their lack of knowledge, and prohibited what God has provided for them, and followed innovations attributed to God. They have gone astray. They are not guided. So you're a loser. You have lack of knowledge. Excuse me. Losers indeed are those who killed their children foolishly. So that's abortion. And why are people doing abortion? Because they have lack of knowledge. They don't understand that that life begins in the womb, and so of course we know that they abortion is occurring, which is killing children, but then they've also prohibited what God has provided for them. So here you have people. Why are they doing abortion? Well, one reason is because they're afraid of the poverty that comes by it. So you're afraid of abortion because of poverty, but then you also are prohibiting many of the foods that would help you with your poverty, So it's interesting how both sides of that. They're afraid of poverty, but then they're following innovations that create more poverty. I was thinking about the lack of knowledge that people have and that cause people to do abortion. Fear of responsibility is one too. Fear of poverty. It's fear. It's definitely fear. So I'll go back to Quran. Subtitle: Zakat must be given on the day of harvest. 6141. He is the one who established gardens, trellised and untrellised, and palm trees and crops with different tastes, and olives and pomegranate, fruits that are similar yet dissimilar. Eat from their fruits and give the due alms on the day of harvest, and do not waste anything. He does not love the wasters. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like Solomon was talking last week, how there's all these variety of crops. They all get the same water. They're all sitting in the same ground, but they come out as different colors, beautiful, different varieties of shapes and tastes and everything. It's really kind of bizarre. You think of it like that. But the main aspect, the main thing we learned from this is about how to do our zakat, and that's to give the due alms on the day of harvest, which was ignored for 1400 years and a little over that, and it was clarified for us by the messenger of the covenant. Let me read the footnote. Zakat charity is so important. The most merciful has restricted his mercy to those who give it. That's in 7:156. Yet the corrupted Muslims have lost this most important commandment. They give zakat only once a year. We see here that zakat must be given away on the day we receive income. The proportion that came to us through Abraham is 2.5% of our net income. So the obligatory charity zakat, the obligatory charity zakat. Zakat must be given away on the day of harvest, 6:141. Whenever we receive net income, we must set aside 2.5% and give it to the specified recipients, who are the parents, the relatives, the orphans, the poor, the traveling alien, in this order. The vital importance of zakat is reflected in God's law. My mercy encompasses all things, but I will specify it for the righteous who give zakat. That's 7:156. Appendix 15 says zakat must be carefully calculated and given away on a regular basis whenever we receive income. Government taxes should be deducted, but not other expenses such as debts, mortgages, and living expenses. If one does not know needy persons, if one does not know needy persons, he or she may give the zakat to a mosque or a charitable organization with the distinct purpose of helping poor people. Charities given to mosques or hospitals or organizations cannot be considered zakat. So it's interesting. You go online, if you look at from the Muslims, they got a whole different procedure, and they don't even mention the order that we have, like parents, relatives, or they've ignored that verse. I was looking online. First of all, they got this minimum, this nisab, that nobody has to pay unless they make over the nisab, which is a minimum. Every year they figure out what the nisab is, and then you figure out what your zakat is over that, and who can receive it. They've got that mixed all up. They say the poor, the needy, the zakat collector, and the converts, and slaves, and the traveler. So that's what they do is they take the general charity rules and they ignore what was spoken of for zakat. Anyway, it's convoluted, but we know what our zakat is, alhamdulillah. In fact, it came towards the end of the message, the time when the messenger was given the message, and it was quite a blessing for us to know that. So 6:142. Some livestock supply you with transportation as well as bedding materials. Eat from God's provisions to you, and do not follow the steps of Satan. He is your most ardent enemy. I mean, think about it. Your livestock, it's your food. So you're out, you travel along. Your food walks itself, and it also it's storing potential bedding for you and all kinds of supplies. But it's all you have to do is put a leash on it and walk along with it, and you don't have to carry your food. You don't have to carry your bedding. It's alive. It's what a blessing. I always thought that was incredible how God made our provisions alive, and so that they could be a blessing for us. Okay, let's move on. Innovative dietary prohibitions condemned. So this is 6:143. 8 kinds of livestock regarding the 2 kinds of sheep, the 2 kinds of goats. Say, is it the 2 males he prohibited, or the 2 females, or the contents of the wombs, or the 2 females? Tell me what you know. Tell me what you know if you are truthful. 6:144. Regarding the 2 kinds of camels and the 2 kinds of cattle, say, is it the 2 males that he prohibited, or the 2 females, or the contents of the wombs of the 2 females? Were you witnesses when God decreed such prohibitions for you? Who is more evil than those who invent such lies and attribute them to God? Thus they mislead people without knowledge. God does not guide such evil people. So God's telling us to challenge these people. Hey, where'd you find it? And it's almost mocking. It's mocking them. You know what? Which one's it? You know, show me where it's written. Okay, so then God makes it really clear right here. The only dietary prohibitions. This is 6:145. Say, I do not find in the revelations given to me any food that is prohibited for any eater except 1, carrion, 2, running blood, 3, the meat of pigs, for it is contaminated, and 4, the meat of animals blasphemously dedicated to other than God. If one is forced to eat these without being deliberate or malicious, then your Lord is forgiver, most merciful. 6:146. For those who are Jewish, we prohibited animals with undivided hooves, and of the cattle and the sheep we prohibited the fat, except that which is carried on their backs, or in the viscera, or mixed with bones. That was a retribution for their transgressions, and we are truthful. So the footnote says only 4 kinds of animal products are prohibited: animals that die of themselves, running blood, not trapped in the meat, and the meat of pigs, and animals dedicated to other than their creator. And verse 146 informs us that such prohibitions are very specific. God prohibits either the meat or the fat, or both, if he so wills. And that's interesting. So you see the Jewish the prohibition, it included the fat, which is except that which is carried on their back or in the viscera, the bones. So they were prohibited from the fat. But in the prohibitions for the submitters, it's the meat. And so that's very clear: meat or fat, meat, fat. So you can't say, well, how do you know it's not just the flesh of pigs? Isn't fat flesh? But no, it's meat. Yeah, it's very clear because the 2 words are specified. So you go to Safeway, or you go to Whole Foods, you go to Trader Joe's, and you ask yourself these questions: Is this dead carrion off? I mean, was this dead before they slaughtered it? Well, no. Is it running blood? Am I buying running blood that I can drink? No. Is it pig? No, I'm not going to buy pig and pig meat. And then you ask yourself, I have to make that clear. Is it pig meat? Because if it's lard or something from the fat, or like some kind of food product that's got it in there, there's no prohibition on there. It's the meat of the pig. So you ask yourself, is it the meat of pig? And then the 4th thing you say, did somebody blasphemously dedicate this to other than God? And if the answer is no, then you can buy it. It's good. That's what halal is. Of course, there's a whole huge industry on halal products, and they, I know they some of these places, they just play a audio tape of God, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, when they slaughter them, and then they sell them in special halal food places. It's kind of strange, but okay, let me see now. Let me move on. Let's go to 6:147. If they disbelieve you, then say, your Lord possesses infinite mercy, but his retribution is unavoidable for the guilty people. 6:148. The idol worshippers say, had God willed, we would not practice idolatry, nor would our parents, nor would we prohibit anything. Thus did those before them disbelieve until they incurred our retribution. Say, do you have any knowledge proven knowledge that you can show us? You follow nothing but conjecture. You only guess. So it's interesting. These idol worshippers are saying, had God willed, we would not have practiced idolatry. So it seems to me that there's an idea that God is doing everything, but they've distorted it, not recognizing that the sign of somebody who's submitting is obedience to God's commands. But they were making the argument that, well, if God willed, we wouldn't be doing this. So they're really taking away any of their responsibility. There's no personal responsibility, or there's no evidence being acquired to illustrate how they're not believers, is what they're saying. But God's got the most powerful argument. And it's right here, 6:149. Say, God possesses the most powerful argument. If he wills, he can guide all of you. Now, the footnote says 6:149. The Quran's mathematical code is a tangible and utterly incontrovertible proof that this is God's message to the world. Now, here's the kicker. This is what is in. This is the main point that has been conveyed in 6:149. It takes divine intervention to prevent any reader from appreciating this extraordinary phenomena, then falling prostrate and accepting this overwhelming miracle. Let me read that again. If people don't recognize the miracle, it's because God has divinely intervened to prevent them from appreciating it. It's a divine intervention. So the argument is so clear and straightforward. This mathematical proof is so just straightforward for anyone who reads it, that if they don't see it, it's proof that it's divinely interference. They're literally being prevented from understanding it. That is incredible. Now, let me read some Quranic verses here. 1857. Divine intervention. Who are more evil than those who are reminded of their Lord's proofs, then disregard them without realizing what they are doing? Consequently, we place shields on their hearts to prevent them from understanding it, the Quran, and deafness in their ears. Thus, no matter what you do to guide them, they can never, ever be guided. God is placing shields on their hearts and their mind. It's divine intervention that is preventing them. It's not like, why don't they get it? There's those kinds of questions is showing our lack of understanding of the answer to that question. The why they're not getting it is God is preventing them from getting it. When you read this 5679, none can grasp it except the sincere. So that's who's going to get it. It's your sincere of heart. Please, God, make our hearts open and receptive to your message. You know, we want to be sincere so that we can understand all aspects of the Quran that God's teaching us. And that's another thing, how God teaches us. He is the one who opens the heart and lets the information go to your heart so that you really understand it. It's God. It's a divine intervention. That's what I'm driving home here. That's the incredible thing, that people would understand it, except God is divinely interfering with that. And, 1745 and 46, we know, when you read the Quran, we place between you and those who do not believe in the hereafter an invisible barrier. Quran, the only source. We place shields around their minds to prevent them from understanding it, and deafness in their ears. And when you preach your Lord using Quran alone, they run away in aversion. Because why? Because God is putting a barrier there. And the reason that what's exposing them is people really don't believe there's really a hereafter. They really don't think they're going to be held accountable. They really don't think that stuff's there. And that's in your heart. And so therefore you are blind to these things. So alhamdulillah. Now it would be, I would love to go through the miracle, but that's the thing, is this is God's most powerful argument. Well, this mathematical miracle provides that ultimate proof, and I I don't know how else to talk about this most powerful argument without going into some of it. But it's 11:45, so I've gone on for 45 minutes. But I encourage everyone to go to Appendix 1 and look at the first 19. I think just that there's the easy. There's the first 19 listed proofs, and just review those. We should be very aware of those, and so that we can share those. And it's and just to remind yourself of how clear this proof actually is, and also to thank God for softening our hearts so that we can receive it. That we're not being, God willing, we're not being prevented from understanding it, from seeing it. We don't want to be among those who are being divinely intervened. So, alhamdulillah. So that's the Quran study, the presentation I have for today. And if there are any questions, alhamdulillah, now's a good time.
Masha Allah, Jeff. Great Quran study.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Masha Allah. All right. Wow. A lot of people joined. Started out pretty small. Alhamdulillah.
So Jeff, I was wondering, it's Surah 139? Verse 139. Sorry, verse 139.
Yeah.
I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. It says, they also said, what's in the bellies of these livestock is reserved exclusively for males among us. So basically, what are they talking about there?
Isn't that gross? I know. It's like basically, there's a baby cow growing in the babies, and apparently that's very a delicacy to them, that if they slaughter a cow with a baby in it, that this is good meat, and it seems like this is only reserved for the men. That's how I'm seeing it. And but if it was born dead, then I that's the way I see it, because if it was stillbirth, they let the wives eat it. They let them share in it. This is the only way I see that. What is in the bellies of these livestock is reserved exclusively for the males among us and prohibited for our wives. But if it was stillbirth, I don't know, or maybe, I don't know. I can read it two ways. Maybe I'm wrong, because maybe they were just saying, look, this cow and this cow, whatever it gives birth to, this is good meat, and you women don't get it unless it's born dead. Then you can share in it. I don't know. That's a good.
Well, no, I think I think that if they slaughter the and there is a baby inside, then are allowed to eat that.
Yeah, that was my first. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and if they give stillbirth like a dead animal, then they would allow their wives to eat that.
Yeah.
But if it's alive in the belly and they slaughter the thing, then only men are allowed to eat the baby.
Yeah, that's how I thought it was too. It's kind of gross in a sense. But the grossest thing about it is how they treat the wives as second. They're so blatant about their treatment of women as second class citizens. How did you read that, Pamela, when you saw it?
I actually wasn't sure how to read that.
Yeah, again, my first understanding was how Solomon had said that as well. But then as you questioned it, I was starting to question myself, thinking, well, maybe it's something other than that. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I guess in the second part, it's not so the second part of it, but if it's stillbirth, so then I guess if it goes to if the cow goes to giving birth, then if it's a stillbirth, then they let the wives eat it. However, if it's slaughtered whilst it have a baby in the belly, then the men eat it. Is that what's
Yeah, that's what it seems like. It seems like if it was a stillbirth. So if a cow aborts its baby, the cow it's dead. So it's previously dead, and the cow aborts it. They'll let the
connectivity issue? Sometimes it's
Assalamu alaikum. What happened?
Walaikum salam. We're on, but we're not sure what happened.
I think Jeff might have got dropped or something. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, so about this verse, it just God is showing us an example about the nonsense this religious false religious doctrines. To what extent are these disbelievers willing to go to create false commandments and stuff? How silly! What is in the bellies? But if it's still birth, what is in the bellies is reserved for the men and prohibited for the wives, but if it was a stillbirth, then they permitted their wives to share therein. Like, it's so crazy. Nonsense. Like, who sat and decided that? Like, didn't they have something better to do? So yeah, religious innovations.
Salãmun Alaykum. My signal dropped out. I totally missed your response. Did you respond? I don't even know if my question was heard. I have no idea how long I've been offline here. What did you say? I'm sorry. Did anybody ask?
We never got your questions. I mean, your response to.
Oh no, I can't hear.
So like 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
Oh.
Okay, I also want to mention that, on verse 6132 that Jeff read, it says, "Thus were the idol worshippers to the extent of children. In fact, their idols inflict great pain and confuse their religion for them. Had God willed, they would not have done it. You shall disregard them and their fabrication." An example that Jeff, elaborated on, but applies to, other prohibitions also, and other, things that they created in the religion. Of course, like, for example, if you look at Hadith and Sunnah, I mean, there's so much that they've added to it that it really makes the religion very convoluted. And a lot of things that they do, such as circumcision, also, mentioned in the books of Hadith as well, and distorted, portion of the Old Testament as well. I mean, it causes great pain upon them, people trauma and PTSD and whatnot, because of their experience as a child. And some people have other issues, will end up committing suicide later on, sometimes even. And then you have examples of doing circumcision on their children, end up dying because of some sort of complication. I mean, that is another example of what's every day here in America and around the world. In the most some of the most developed countries, while the United States being, and I think there's like at least like 1 or 2 children dying every day on average in America because of circumcision. And I think that verse also perfectly applies there, because it talks about their idols, they're duped by their idols. So in this case, like, whatever sources they've set up besides God, or whoever wrote these lies, and they are idolizing, or whoever hating it and they're idolizing that, whether it's an individual or a group of people. And so I thought I should just mention that. And then also the verse that you read, 138. I mean, they're just innovations condemned, right? So basically, I mean, this brings me back to the end. People were claiming that is not prohibited and whatnot, and we're prohibiting it. But the idea is that when you're saying that something that God's advocating and it's part of the religion, and it's really not, that by definition is a religious innovation. Clearly from the subtitle, I mean, God has given us this example, but basically all religious innovations are condemned. Add anything to the religion that God did not. Sorry, I'm hearing feedback. That God did not, you know, advocate as part of the religion or command us to do. So that's an innovation. So any innovation you want to add, I mean, it's condemned. So God has prohibited it. You know, it's prohibited for us innovations to our religion and attribute them to God. Could be anything, and I think that's what's one of the reasons why we have to be careful when we do things, especially when it comes to practicing our religion in public. Like if we are doing things that are not part of our salat and stuff like that, like we just do our prayer and we get up, like, you know, don't do extra prostrations and things like that that other people might look at right after the prayer, or do something weird like before the prayer. Like, you know, I've seen people that before, now it's common, at least in some communities, where just before it's time for prayer, everybody gets up to pray, and then, you know, some people are in the bathroom or something, and then they just stand up, and just before the prayer starts, they're standing up, everybody in lines to do the prayer, and then they start commemorating God, you know. And I think that has become very ingrained among some of them. That that has a potential to become an innovation, where people might think that is part of our religion in terms of like being part of our prayer. So we have to be careful. And the Messenger of the Covenant himself, you know, he gives examples of how we have to be careful. Innovations creep up on us. Like they don't just come like suddenly, you know, they just slowly they start building up. And before you know, it's part of your religion. And so like he talks about why, like, you know, when he finishes his contact prayer, like when he's at home, like he sits down, you know, he commemorates God and does whatever. But when he's out in public, you know, he just does his prayer and gets up straight away, like doesn't sit down, doesn't do anything extra, you know. And I think that's the example we should follow to make sure that we don't add anything into our religion.
Assalamu alaikum, Salman. Just could you please clarify that one when you mentioned that people there is standing up that commemorate God? I just didn't understand. What did you just say?
Yeah, no, so what people do is, sure, yeah, what people do is, you know, they stand up to do the prayer, and while they're waiting for others to join, as they're standing up, you know, they stand up to the prayer and they realize, oh, such and such in the bathroom, or something like that, or so and so is on their way, and they, you know, and let's wait for them, let's, like, they try to be polite or something, I don't know. And so what they end up doing is everybody's standing in lines, you know, just as you would for doing your prayer, just before the prayer starts. And for sometimes like 4 or 5 minutes, you know, even more, like they'll just stand up. Everybody is standing up in line to do their prayer just before the prayer, and they're all, you know, singing zikr, you know. So
Oh,
You know, he
mhm.
said it could become innovation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
I
Got it,
appreciate it.
Sulman. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Masha Allah.
Yeah, welcome.
I actually, it's not a question for me, but it's how some people who claim to be Quranists looking at it. And so it's verse 140. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. It says, loser indeed are those who kill their children foolishly due to their lack of knowledge and prohibited what God has provided for them and followed innovation attributed to God. They have gone astray, they are not guided. So I seen a lot of the Quranist group, you know, they're saying that children is not a fetus. They're saying children are fully born. And so if someone can touch on that, um, at least we Muhammad and I are clear, you know, we see the way Rashad said it, but some people are still having difficulties understanding that children is not from the womb. It's not a fetus.
Salãmun Alaykum. Here's a verse that I think should eliminate all confusion. Surah 3, verse 35. The wife of Amram said, "My Lord, I have dedicated the baby in my belly to you totally. So accept from me, you are hearer, omniscient." So alhamdulillah, that's all I need to know.
Masha Allah, thank you, Ahmed.
Awesome. That's excellent. I never got that one. That was a good one. Because it's a baby in the belly. It's not a fetus in there. It's a baby.
Exactly. And then there's another verse somewhere, if people are still wondering. I'm still trying to find it, where God specifically mentions that we are created in the womb and designed in the womb. I think that's pretty straightforward as well.
Of course, the creation process doesn't finish for some people until they do their sink. So it's, yeah, that's really wild how the Jews say that God didn't finish creation, that man did by doing certain.
And then there's another verse somewhere, trying to find it, where God specifically mentions us, like humans, that we are either born like alive or dead. Like it's up to God. Like where does our test end?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So the
So
birth is not, yeah, we were created in the womb, and whether we spend any time on this planet outside the womb is up to God. But we're there in the womb.
Yeah, so God identifies us even while we are in the womb.
Interesting. Yep. Yeah. Those are very powerful proofs.
I don't think feminists care about proof. Or Satanists.
Let's see.
Maybe some listeners might feel that, oh no, like if someone had done an abortion and they feel guilty, that Satan will use that, be hard-headed and never accept it. Because if you accept it, then you have to accept you have done something wrong. I mean, it's just really human behavior. But even if you have done abortion, don't think that God's mercy is beyond you. You can repent and you can do better. So
Masha Allah.
don't lose hope. Just repent and don't repeat the sins.
Right.
That's what I believe. I mean, that's what the Quran says.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's how Satan gets to people,
Mm-hmm.
trying to feel them, make them feel guilty, and then that plays with the ego.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you don't admit your mistakes, then you have not made a mistake, so to speak.
Right. Oh, a good point. Yeah.
And it is the same with circumcision. Maybe a lot of this who supported, a lot of the submitters who supported, maybe they had their children circumcised, and if they admit that they have done something wrong, then they have to face that every day, like the guilt.
That's right.
I don't think, but they shouldn't. You made a mistake. Yes, God will punish you by reminding you that this is wrong, and that could be a blessing in disguise to daily, on a daily basis, inspire you to never uphold unproven laws ever again. Like, that's the blessing in disguise, if you wanna find one.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to call it a blessing in disguise. It's because it's permanent damage that they inflicted on your child. So,
you have to.
I mean, it was a
but
it was a,
miserably.
yeah, but I mean, it's a
You-
consequence. You can look at it as a consequence of something you did. I mean, a consequence of not following the Quran alone, and that should, in a way, should be a lesson for you. But I mean, a blessing is something really bad happened, but you look back and you realize, it was something good, that happened, and so, like, I have a hard time looking at it that way, because it's not a blessing. It's almost
No.
Satan inflicting you.
The blessing in the sky is very minute, very small.
Yeah, for me, a blessing in disguise would be, let's say, like, you have certain circumstances. You want to get a job you really like, and you think it's awesome, and you don't get the job, and you're sad, and because you really wanted that job, but then something else comes along that's even better, and something that you really wanted, and you realize, looking back now, that was a good thing that happened to you, because had you gotten that job, you would have stayed there, and you wouldn't have gotten this other one, and it's a life-changing event. Yeah.
I get it.
I
I mean,
So I have
yeah, please.
a question. So, of course, mashallah, we do follow the dietary provision of the Quran. But as Muslims, we do have a lot of Muslim guests, and when you have Muslim guests, you have to go out and purposely buy halal meat. So, is that something that we should not purposely go out and do, or because we're
No,
Muslim?
halal meat is good for us to eat as well, so I wouldn't make halal meat prohibited. So I
Yeah,
mean,
plus it usually tastes better too.
but yeah, it's not prohibited. It's meat. The only question you ask is, what can't I eat? And is it running blood? Is something God? And here's the thing: halal meat was dead, so it's halal. I mean, you can eat it, and you can buy it. You can buy it for your Muslim friends because of their restrictions.
Just breaking up. Okay. Okay.
You know, Ahmed, you were bringing up a good point there about how people, there's a pride. There's this pride that doesn't want to admit that we've done something wrong. Maybe it's horrendous. Maybe it's a small thing, and that you can see people digging in and choosing disbelief because of simple pride. You're saying, well, don't let Satan weigh you down with your guilt, and that whole concept. There's a Psalm 32 that it kind of goes through this kind of stuff that I'd like to share. It's Psalm 32. I'll start with verse 4. So it's talking about God, the heaviness of the guilt. So day and night your hand lay heavily on me. My strength shriveled in the summer heat. I made my sins known to you, and I did not cover up my guilt. I decided to confess them to you. You forgave all my sins. For this reason, let all godly people pray to you when you may be found. Then raging flood waters will not reach them. You are my hiding place, my refuge. You protect me from the trouble. You surround me with joyous songs of salvation. I will instruct you. I will teach you the way that you should go. I will advise you as my eyes watch over you. Do not be stubborn like a horse or mule.
Wow. That song puts it
Restrain them. My heart awaits the wicked people. Okay, so that was what I want to share. It's pretty.
Yeah, because when I discovered that I have been sinning or betraying God or whatever out of ignorance, I feel like a traitor. Like I don't want to be in my own skin.
Right.
And I think that's what we all feel when we discover that we have done something wrong. And for these people to have mutilated their own children, their own blood, and in combination with inventing and following an innovation that betrays God and even puts words in God's mouth, making God like this evil that mutilates children and puts them at the risk of death. Yeah, that feels heavy.
Yeah.
So of course they are gonna be hard, very, very dense.
Mm-hmm.
But they should not lose hope.
Right.
God forgives everything. But Satan uses that fear, those feelings of regret against us.
Also, I think humans they don't. I mean, they'll question everything they stand for, everything they've made up their foundations on. So their entire principles or religious standing of the religion is now on a structure that accommodates this idea idea somehow, like
So the
with the theory of that's protected, they feel they have to safeguard their image and safeguard, the validity of their concepts, and
yeah, it becomes like a
reputation.
reputation, social image to keep.
Yeah,
Like if I tell you the apple is red,
yeah,
I tell everyone the apple is red, but it turns out the apple is green. Then the
yeah,
human
yeah,
arrogance
exactly. Yeah,
will continue to say the apple is red.
yeah,
No matter the
yeah,
evidence.
yeah. It becomes a matter of your ego, basically, and you rejected something in the past. Now you can't accept it.
Yeah. And it, like
That reminds. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I just want to quickly add. It
It
does
reminds-
burn. It does burn inside.
Yeah.
But just do it. Just admit defeat. It gets better.
I do have a question. Can I say?
Yes.
So I was not able, Mohammed and I have not finished all the audios, so I'm not sure if this was clarified in the audios. But if a pregnancy happens out of incest or rape, what are the shall cover that topic in the video? We did a lot of the videos, audios, but we have not accomplished all of them. Was that covered?
Pamela, you're sounding muted. Could you better differently because we didn't
I got a
understand you?
question. I got a question.
Oh,
She's
you
asking,
did? Okay.
she's asking if somebody gets pregnant by rape or incest, is it okay to get an abortion? And my take on that would be, well, God doesn't make any exceptions of when you can get abortion. God says, don't get it, period. Now, having said that, I don't think that for any submitter, like who truly believes in, upholding God's commandments, including not having abortion, that God would even put them in the situation like that. But even if it ever happens, hypothetically speaking, I mean, it could, for people who are not under God's protection. I think that, God doesn't, create these exceptions. So even though that might be legally acceptable, I mean, legal definitions of what's legal doesn't set the boundaries on what's lawful in our religion, right? So, like, drugs and alcohol are legal. That doesn't mean uh, we're lawful. They're lawful for us. So, I mean, we should just. I think people should just pray to God that they are under God's protection all the time. And but I mean, if a child is destined to come to this world, I mean, or a baby is born, a baby's in someone's belly. I mean, that's still a life, and God says, we cannot do that except for someone who's committed horrendous crimes. If you're avenging an injustice, like someone killed another person, and you can have you. A woman for a woman or a man for a man. I mean, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, God has told us when you can kill, or in self-defense. Like, let's say. So, I mean, a good example of self-defense would be, let's say, like you have a baby in your, or I mean, I guess that could apply where, let's say you have a baby in your belly, or either you or the baby could live, right? And then, well, of course, it's a matter of life and death for you. So you have to probably save yourself. But I can't think of any other scenario based on Quran where it would be justified to let the baby die.
I asked because there's some laws in the United States that's about to be passed with this issues at hand.
Right.
Yeah, Alabama passed it. It did pass state. So, it's a tough test for that person. That's a tough situation for that person to be in. And there are documentaries that show people who've actually gone, they have the child, and the mothers will say it's the best thing that ever happened to the child is the best thing, not the rape, but the child turns out to be such a blessing for them. And I think that we have the wrong idea about ownership and who a child is and what that means and the connection with DNA. It seems like that this idea that it would be a violation to you is wrong. I mean, God creates in the womb however God does it. And I know this is going to fly with something, right? It's very hard to say it this way, but it is God's process. He's bringing his souls into the earth, onto earth, how he chooses. And if a rape occurs, that's separate from the fact that God is also bringing in souls into this world. I don't know if that would ever help somebody in rationalizing it, but it's such a terrible test that I wouldn't want on anyone.
Yeah, I want to interject here. The idea that abortion, I mean, I'm not for abortion, that's, but I am for freedom of choice. I don't think we have a right. But I tell you something, you get an 11-year-old girl who got pregnant because, let's say, her uncle raped her, and you're saying, no, that she has to carry it to term because all abortions are wrong. I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree that, because here's the thing. What about the child? Nobody cares about the child after it's born. Okay, all this law really cares about is, all abortion is wrong and that's it. We're not going to, worry about when the child is born. I don't agree that rape and incest, it doesn't matter. You should still carry the child. I think that's a horrible, short-sighted view. And I think that, and I find it really interesting when I hear men saying this, because it's not them who has to deal with that. It's not them who has to carry the child. So I don't agree that, all abortion is wrong no matter what. And I don't agree also that the 11-year-old is not in the kingdom of God, and so therefore it happened to her. There's too many cases like that to make this sweeping gesture of all abortions are wrong no matter what, no matter how. That's my opinion, and this really frustrates me when I hear this kind of talk, because it's very there's no compassion. I don't hear any compassion with this. And God is, if anything, he's compassionate and merciful. And there's always exceptions, always. My opinion.
That's it's a tough situation that they'd be in. The understanding that you are presenting is the compassionate understand. That's exactly, we want to be considerate. We want to be compassionate. We want to we want to help the person heal from the traumatic event. We want to do the right thing. But there's so many times in the Quran where we learn where people are trying to be more godly than God in that sense. And so it's not like we're not saying don't be good. We're saying what is doing good. It's not questioning your motives for thinking that way. That seems like a natural position to take. The motives of that. It's a test, I think. That this is just I just think it's my opinion is that this is my opinion. This second is that it's a test that we would submit, or that person would submit under that circumstance as well, knowing that God controls everything. I don't know. It's a tough situation, but I don't see any Quranic evidence for the position you took. If you could supply that, that would help.
What are you talking about? Supply what? Evidence of what? That,
No,
that God,
no,
God would say, wait a minute, that God would say that 11-year-old has to carry that baby to term no matter how it's going to threaten that little girl's life, no matter what it's going to do to her psychologically. And God is saying, I don't care. That's just the way it is. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that.
I mean, if it
And
happened,
I think that too much attention is paid on what the woman is going to do and not on the men who caused that. And that's the reality of the situation, that women are raped and women are experiencing incest and being molested because men are having because these are men's sins, and the woman is made to pay while he walks away. And this is wrong, period.
yeah, nobody would say it's right.
I understand that nobody would say it, but the bottom line is this.
These are examples from disbelieving communities. I mean, these are consequences. I mean, they still receive cancer, war, and crime. They're killing each other. It's a consequence of being in Satan's dominion. And they put their children in the same dominion. We can't use that as an example to decide what is right and wrong in God's dominion.
Ahmed, I have a really hard time when I hear that being said.
Yeah, I understand.
I have a really hard time with it, and I still haven't been able to come up with something that where I'm able to, and this could just be me, but I do not understand, because this doesn't make sense to me with who God is, that he would have the child abused, and he would have the child suffer, and well, that's just too bad, because your parents are no good, so you're going to suffer too. That's not God. I don't get that. I don't understand that. And I know that I hear all the time, well, maybe that soul was we don't know what that soul did in the other life or whatever, but it doesn't feel right to me. It's just something. So I feel like we're missing the point on something, and I don't understand that. I don't.
It is wrong, of course. It's
Then I used to see things the way you did, and I have a personal experience of a friend of mine whose mom at 11-year-old was gang raped by 6, and so the child was given for adoption immediately, and his mom came from a very dysfunctional home, and his mom eventually had 6 more siblings eventually, and he's one of them. Later on, as adult, they knew of their sibling that was given up for adoption, and they went to meet her. And when they went to meet her, she's fully functional, good, normal in every way. So like Jeff was saying, it's a being. You don't know in that situation what being God will put in the womb. She's fully functional in every way, have family, had grandchildren when her siblings met her. And so I used to see things the way you see it, Dana, and now I see things the way Jeff sees it. That only God knows what he will put in that womb. And yes, a 11-year-old giving birth, trauma to the body, being gang raped by 6, a lot of trauma. I get that. But at the end of the day, it's like if the Quran says, we're not supposed to be doing this, and God places that soul in that person, then the way I see it is we go with that.
There are many layers, but nobody is saying that we should that it is okay. I mean, it is a disaster, but we have to submit, and we can't counter evil with evil. That's life.
We can't counter evil with evil.
Yeah, two evils don't make
That's
one right.
That's right.
And it hurts, and the blood boils in you, and you want to save the world, and you want to hug every child and make them feel safe and save every innocent, but you can't. That's not what we're here for.
So it comes down to it. Obviously, alleviating suffering is God is all for alleviating suffering. However, to do what's considered an evil in order to alleviate suffering is what we're talking about here. At what point is the suffering so horrible that it justifies an evil act to alleviate that suffering?
I'm gonna read a verse quickly. I'm just gonna begin somewhere. Okay, we'll read from the beginning. O people, if you have any doubt about resurrection, remember that we created you from dust and subsequently from a tiny drop which turns into a hanging embryo. Then it becomes a fetus that is given life or deemed lifeless. We just clarify things for you. We settle in the wombs whatever we will for a predetermined period. We then bring you out as infants. Then you reach maturity. While some of you die young, others live to the worst age, only to find out that no more knowledge can be attained beyond a certain limit. So, yeah, I'm going to end that there. It continues. So we can see that, yeah, we created from dust, and then we become a hanging embryo, and then we become a fetus that is given life or deemed lifeless. So how I see this is the material used to create us is dust, tiny drop, and then a hanging embryo that develops into a fetus. And it is then the fetus that is given life or deemed lifeless. So as I see it, if you can abort before it becomes a fetus, then maybe that's okay. But then we're faced with another dilemma. The fetus was created from dust, a tiny drop, which then turns into a hanging embryo. But that is lifeless until it reaches the fetus stage. That's when life is given. I don't know. Maybe it's a circular reasoning. I don't know.
No, but that it says it. Then it becomes a fetus that is given life or
Yeah.
deemed lifeless. That's when
Yes.
it's given life in fetus.
Yeah. So maybe if you take an after day pill, I don't know.
You know, that's interesting there, that then it becomes a fetus that is given life. So if it's the hanging embryo in that stage, would that be considered an abortion? You know, that's another thing. I don't know. Interesting.
To me, it feels like it seems clear that if life or death is at the fetus stage.
Yeah. Then it
We
is.
can't hear you, Salman.
Yeah, that's a really powerful statement right there. Then that is given life or deemed lifeless. It's interesting.
we can't hear you.
Are you okay, Salãmun? Salãmun, are you okay?
Yeah,
Are you in trouble? Are you in trouble, Salãmun?
He's becoming a robot.
No, he's gargling with
Oh.
mouth.
Okay. Salãmun?
Be right back.
Yo. I'll be right back, like Terminator, right?
Yeah, like the Terminator.
I'll be back. Can you guys hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good, Masha Allah. No, I was saying is given life or deemed lifeless. I mean, that could also mean the soul, you know?
What? It means
so
what?
When you're in the soul, like before you give birth, you're assigned a soul, right?
Mhm.
When you give birth, at birth, you know. So when it talks about then it's given life or deemed lifeless, doesn't necessarily apply to the fetus or the embryo.
Right.
You know, it's either the child is born or the child is dead. So.
Well, are you talking about the idea that the body can be alive but yet it doesn't have a soul, and that's evidence of it? There, you're saying is that, for example, it doesn't provide any evidence of when the soul is put into the body, that it's a person. It's just like
what I'm saying. I think we were just talking about when a life is considered. And I think there's this idea that, like, for example, Adib promotes, and so he says that until it becomes a fetus, it is not abortion. And so abortion's okay as long as it's dealt with at an earlier stage. And I'm saying that's doesn't make sense. And when it says then it becomes a fetus and it's deemed lifeless or given life. That's talking about assigning the soul at birth when the child comes to this world.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't.
Yeah, I understood that wrong.
Explain. Now I'm confused. I don't know.
So the embryo is alive. You know, the fetus is always alive.
Yeah, exactly.
But then God assigns the soul, the identity, the personality. You are assigned to that fetus at that stage when it becomes a fetus.
But it becomes a fetus at the end of 2 months. So basically, we're assigned a soul at the end of 2 months. Is that what we're saying?
No, that's not what they're saying. That's what I thought they were saying, but I don't think they're saying that. Could you, Solomon, could you?
So what I understand is it's always alive. However, at the end, when it's a fetus, which is a fetus is at the end of 2 months. So when it becomes a fetus, then it's assigned a DNA, a life, your being, who you're going to be.
Yeah.
But it's always alive.
Yeah, it's always alive, but then the identity is the fetus stage.
How do you know that? Where are you getting that it's assigned a soul at a fetus? Where do we see that?
On Hadith. Yeah.
Let me get the hadith.
In Hadith.
I'm just kidding. No,
it's
this
4
verse,
months.
22, Surah 22, verse 5. O people, if you have any doubt about resurrection, remember that we created you from dust and subsequently from a tiny drop, which turns into a hanging embryo.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes a fetus that is given life or deemed lifeless.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. If you have any doubt about okay, we created you from dust. We created you from dust, and subsequently from a tiny drop, which turns into a hanging embryo. Then it. So there's a you from dust, and then it's an it from. It becomes a fetus. that is given life. I just can't see how we can determine any soul assignment from that sentence.
The life, because the embryo is alive.
It's
And
alive.
yeah, it's
Yes,
alive.
agree. I
So
agree
the
that
life
it's
given is
life.
something
But
external.
About soul, it's mentioned in Hadith.
Ah.
But
Mentioned in
Jesus'
Hadith
body was
that
alive.
the baby gets soul after, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 4 months after. It's Hadith.
But we don't care about hadith, right? So we're
Yeah.
trying to figure
Yeah,
out hadith.
But there are like references to
the
it.
basic from, that's why some of scholars said that we can do some abortion because they thought that the baby has no soul, because the soul will be blew into the baby after about 4 months, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot.
But this verse tells us that
But from the Quran, we know that
it's
from the
alive.
tiny drop is already alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's interesting because he created you from dust. So it's almost like you are you before you're formulated into semen and into the egg. And then he assembles it and decides, I don't know. I don't know where you are you in this verse.
Actually, when I read this verse, right, verse number 5, so it says, okay, oh people, if you have any doubt about resurrection, we created you from a dust and subsequently from a tiny drop, which turns into a hanging embryo. Okay, then it becomes a fetus that is given life. So at the stage of fetus, that God is giving, I would think that's a soul.
Yeah, it's already alive, right?
Yes, it is life,
Mhm.
and God is signing soul. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's
Because
how I understood it now.
that's how it says that then it becomes a fetus that is given life or deemed life.
Yeah.
That is given life or deemed lifeless. So that's the area I'm looking at here. So my understanding would be when is hanging embryo fetus, that fetus is given life, and as soon as it becomes fetus, basically, from hanging embryo
No,
stage to
but it's
fetus.
alive already, and
No,
they
it
become
is life.
soul.
Correct, but the
Given a
soul is
soul.
given when it becomes that fetus stage.
Well, you know,
That's my
Well,
understanding.
that's what Ahmed is saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my understanding.
Yeah, because if we look at Jesus, when he was captured to be crucified, he was alive, but I mean, God raised him to him, but the body was alive, functioning. That's the equivalent of this embryo thing.
Jeff, you have a different thought on this?
What did you say?
And I was asking Jeff that Jeff, do you have a different understanding on this?
Yeah, what I was thinking was that I was having a hard time seeing that given life was the statement fetus that is given life or deemed lifeless. I was having a hard time seeing that is where a soul is placed into the fetus. Because if you do that, then it does open the door for early term abortion from
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so
Okay, it can be used as an argument, yes, but actually it doesn't, because it clearly says that it is alive.
Yeah,
It's
the
not just
prohibition for killing.
It's not you. It's not a person like with a personality, but it is still something that is alive.
Yeah.
You have to kill it. Therefore, you are killing.
In my understanding, killing, it doesn't mean with the soul. Killing is something that alive.
Yeah.
No matter what, it's any soul or not, we don't know.
like in the Quran when we kill the animals for food.
Ahmed, I
That's even
understand what
used.
you're saying now. Jesus' soul was taken up,
Yeah,
but his physical body was here, so they killed
yeah,
his physical body. So
yeah.
we,
His body was still alive.
yes, as human being, if you take abortion even from day one, it's killing the physical, even if the soul is not there. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. You
No
know,
matter what, any soul or not,
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah, that's
never
right.
know.
you know, the messenger talks about the three aspects of, or actually four, if you count the companion, of us, that we're a body, just physical material, and then God, there's life breathed into you, which is the fact that it's a living organism, and then your soul is in it, and then of course your companion, that aspect of it. So there's that the thing is alive, and we're not supposed to kill a live thing, is what you're saying, but that may not be it may not be a soul in there yet, but you still don't kill it, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how I understood that verse.
Yeah.
That's what I'm learning from it.
Yeah.
And this is new to me because I used to believe that, like, at certain stage, at the early stage, you can kill.
I see.
I'd make an abortion, but I don't like to use the word abortion. I like to use the word kill because that's what it is.
Yeah. Right.
If everybody used the word kill instead of abortion, then we would have a discussion about it. Then everybody will talk about it. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh yeah, I had an abortion last month. Yeah. It
But
will be
you
instead,
know,
oh yeah, I killed my child last month. It's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But Satan likes to numb the mind with these funny new words like abortion. It's fine. It sounds fine, and etiquette. There's an etiquette to it.
Oh.
You sit around the table and you eat with.
About this topic, I have story about this. My sister-in-law got a breast cancer. They have been married about 8 years. Has no kid. And then when they knew that she got pregnant, my brother don't want to kill the baby. Just let it live. And the end of story is not too good because she passed away after the baby is born. His baby is born about 1 month after. So in this story, I get that my brother don't want to kill the baby, even though, even he know that his wife will going to die. I think it's about choice, killing or not killing.
But did she die because of giving birth, or
Yeah, after
was it because of the cancer?
the cancer.
Yeah, but so it's not the
Of
child
course,
that killed
because the pregnancy is activate the hormone of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem.
You know, I wonder sometimes, do we think we understand the biological process more than what we really do, than what it really is? Do we overestimate our understanding of that?
I doubt that we do understand it completely. Actually.
Yeah, the doctor said it's have a choice. Take the abortion, maybe it can decrease the cancer activity.
Maybe.
Maybe. It's still maybe.
Yeah, maybe. See, these scientists,
So
how clever they are.
Yeah, it's hard choice.
Yeah. No,
Because he know the risk if they continue the pregnancy, it will make the cancer more active. And the doctor's right. a month after the birth, yeah, she passed away.
But outcome could have been
Okay.
the same.
Yeah, that's true. And also, when I read this verse, also I look at it that when the fertilization happen, like when someone become pregnant, it's God already have assigned a soul. It's just an indication, a soul is being assigned and signed to come
So,
in. So it doesn't matter what stage you do these things. That's sin, period. It doesn't
yep,
matter what
It's
stage.
part of a
Yeah.
plan.
yeah.
Once the fertilization happens, it basically telling us, okay, soul is being assigned, right? So that's how I look at it. Yeah, even though, let's talking about here that okay, we turn into an embryo and then it becomes a fetus that is given life. But when that fertilization happened, a soul is being assigned for it. That's my understanding.
Mm.
Mhm.
You know, it's interesting because we're talking about for submitters, how a submitter is to understand this. And clearly, people who are different, they're not going to have this understanding until society is educated to that point, where they're convinced, that where they know, look, this is it. So of course, a person who is a submitter, they'll want to submit to God and God's creation process, even under that circumstance. That would be the behavior of a submitter. And but imposing that as a public policy without a collective agreement on that would be hard to shove down people's throats.
Another.
To what Horatio said about his brother and his wife, you know, even if did not go through the pregnancy, the outcome could have been the same. She could have died even earlier, same time, because God already assigned that time for us to die, isn't it?
Right.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I was thinking that as well. At least he has a son to remember her by.
Yeah.
That's right. She would not have any.
Oh, he was.
Running from war. That verse that talks about you may be fearful, you run from it, but you're not going to. Your death is already predetermined.
If we here's the kicker. Here is when I'm gonna be funny. So if we believe that abortion can ever be justified, if we justify it because of this reason and this reason, then wouldn't that be, like, think about this, what if God decided not to create us because God knew we were bad? Wouldn't you appreciate God creating you even though God knew your destiny, the consequences of your existence? Isn't that mercy? So we can learn from that it is mercy not to abort a child. That is how merciful God is. God allowed us to exist.
For a
Just as
chance
we're
to
made,
grow our soul.
yeah, to grow and learn and decide. So if we're gonna be the judges who decide that a child doesn't deserve to live, then we are not like godly people. We are not the people of God. we don't understand God. We don't understand God's mercy. We are not
Yeah.
following
Mhm.
God's mercy.
But
So,
just to make it,
Mm.
go ahead, Hario. Go ahead.
Okay, in my understanding, whatever it takes, killing is killing. It's easy for God to say, "Oh, you can go abortion if any or accept something." Yeah, it's easy to God to say that. In my understanding, abortion is prohibited,
mm,
no matter what.
yeah.
What if though? What if the circumstances that the mother
Sorry.
what about the circumstance where the birth is actually threatening the life of the mother, alleviating suffering in that cause, in that situation? So you're saving the life of the mother.
That's
Doctors are in that position.
that's our logic, right? That's just
Yeah, that's our logic, exactly.
that's just our logic. It's like in the war, God said you can kill them. It's easy to God to say that you can go abortion.
But he did not say it.
Yeah, but he did not say that.
Exactly. And it's just an excuse. Like, I used to believe it. Like, oh yeah, in certain cases where the woman's life is threatened, but we don't know that. All these doctors are going by our previous uh, circumstances or situations
Right.
or events, and they're
Right.
using the same event to judge every new event,
Mhm.
and then they use statistics
Yeah.
to
Like
justify it.
my wife here, ever diagnosed pregnant. We all know that my wife got breast cancer before.
Mm-hmm.
We just let it, just let, just let the, just let the baby. But you know what? But a month after or 2 months after, she got her period.
Oh, I see.
So I think it's all God designed everything. It's God doing everything.
Yeah,
Indeed.
he's doing, and we submit.
Yeah, as long we claim as a submitter, so God doing everything.
Right.
We have no rights to make any kind of new rules or any new statement
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
regarding about yeah, God's plan. We never
Mm-hmm.
know.
God controls life.
Yeah, God's control life.
And
That's my point of view. That's my point of view. Period.
Yeah. Actually, you know what I find interesting? Verse 39:6. I seek refuge in God from Satan that protected. It says he created you from one person, then created from him his mate. He sent down to you 8 kinds of livestock. He created you in your mother's belly, creation after creation, in trimesters of darkness. So it goes to show that each trimester counts. Because I know there are some Quranists out there, they're saying the first trimester don't count, only the second and third. So you can do whatever you want in the first trimester. But God's saying here in trimesters of darkness, and he's talking about creation, right? So each trimester counts. What I could understand. If anybody had a different point of view.
which
Interesting.
verse?
39:6.
39.
Bellies. He creates you in your mother's bellies, creation after creation, in trimesters of darkness. And so you're saying it includes the first trimester, is what you're saying, that one, if I understand you correctly. that
I would imagine. It didn't say exempt is the first trimester.
yeah, he doesn't. You're right.
Trimesters.
You know, I just noticed something else. Why is God talking about killing your children, and also about the 8 kinds of? I thought we read that today too. Something about right around the same time.
Livestock, yeah, livestock. We're reading about livestock
Mm.
of children.
Yeah.
Altogether.
So there are like 3 stages. First trimester 0 to 13 weeks. Second trimester 14 to 26 weeks. Third trimester 27 to 40 weeks.
Did you notice that, by the way, you guys? 6139 is talking about what's in the bellies of the livestock, and the 8, and the verse for that's about the 8 types of livestock, I think.
That too,
And then,
yes.
and then right after that, it's saying, "Don't kill your children because you're afraid of that." And
Yeah,
then,
because
and then in this 39:6, what's the significance of that? About the 8 livestock and then creation, the birth of the children. I mean, I don't, maybe nothing, but it's correlation.
I don't see any
Yeah. Okay.
connection.
Okay.
I mean, I don't. And I would have to study all the verses and everything to even
Yeah.
find, because I can't come up with anything right now.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe there is, but I don't know if there is. Only saying what I know.
But what she said is that that first trimester is not exempted from the creation process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not exempted. It's included here
Yeah.
in that verse that she read just now.
And even as an infant, I'm certainly, God keeps the creation going. I mean, look at us now compared to as an infant. We're obviously, the creation process continues in our life.
True.
And verse 6151, which Jeff, I don't think you read up to that far.
No.
In that it had, I seek refuge in God from Satan rejected. It says 6151, see, come, let me tell you what your Lord has really prohibited for you. You shall not set up idols beside him. You shall honor your parents. You shall not kill your children from fear of poverty. We provided for you and for them. You shall not commit gross sin, obvious or hidden. You shall not kill. So when Ahmed was talking about, we should say not kill instead of abortion, it says here, you shall not kill. God has made life sacred except in the course of justice. These are his commandments to you that you may understand.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
He
a very
could
good
have said,
verse.
he could have said, except in the course of alleviating suffering, but he did not.
That verse can also be abused by some people. Like, they think they are smart. For example, it says, "Oh, so in the case of economic issues, like, don't kill your children because of money. Like, you don't have the money to take care of them." So someone might think, "Oh, I can just abort my child if it's sick, if it's handicapped." But then, if we sit down and talk about it, what is the reason why you don't want a sick child or a handicapped child? Because you can't afford it. You don't have the time to take care of it, or the money. So it goes back to the money issue, which God prohibits. You can't kill your child because you don't have the money to take care of it. So yeah,
It says God
been
has
struggling a lot with that verse for many years.
And then there's
struggling.
Verse 1731. It says abortion is murder under the heading. And again, it says, you shall not kill your children due to fear of poverty. We provided for them as well for you. Killing them is a gross offense.
What verse was that?
1731.
Yeah, it clearly says we provide for them as well
Yeah.
for you. So we have no right to say, "Oh,
We
I
can find
can't take care of my child because I
we can
yeah.
find in the index, so killing allowed only on war.
So wow, God got everything covered.
Yeah. We can find in the index killing forbidden in 285, 429, allowed in 2191. Everything
I
killing
mean,
allowed. Overall, I read the index. The killing is allowed on war only.
Allowed. Allowed.
Yeah, allowed
in
on war only.
self-defense and to elevate oppression. Keywords.
Say that again. Say it again.
In
Yeah, yeah.
self-defense and to alleviate oppression.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you could just start a war and start killing whatever you want.
Oh, yeah.
Ahmed, I'm killing. I kill you.
You must first declare war.
Ahmed, the terrorist. I kill you.
Ahmed.
Ahmed, the terrorist.
But
I kill you.
17, Surah
I still
17.
remember that verse. I kill you.
No, never forget the verse.
Assalamualaikum, guys. We're going to sign off now.
Okay. Salāmun Alaykum. Salāmun Alaykum.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Okay. I guess we could end the broadcast right now as well. So, inshallah, the next Quran study will be next Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And God willing, we will start. Let's see, what was it? What did I stop at? Let's see. We will start at Surah 6, verse 150. That will be the beginning next week. So God bless, and may everyone have a wonderful week, and may we grow our souls. Okay.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.